All right, folks, welcome on into another edition of the High School Huddle, your one-stop shop for everything and all things Section 5 sports. I'm AJ Feldman. He is Carl Jones. And we haven't done a lot of weather chats lately, but the weather we've gotten lately certainly deserves one, Carl.
Man, Park Avenue, you see me a lot this week, all right? As all those 80-degree days we've had this week, I've been out and about. I just want to be seen, want to be felt by the sun, all that good type of stuff, man. We got summer in October in Rochester, New York. I mean, Vegas can't be choosers. I'll take that 10 times out of 10, man. It's been a great week for the weather.
No, it was last Monday, I think. I took out the air conditioner from my bedroom, my window AC. And that day, I went into work, and the 8-day forecast finally started to show this heat wave, and I'm like, I don't know if I should have done that yet. So it's been a little toasty sleeping over here at the Feldman residence, but it's going to change for the worse, unfortunately. Tomorrow, I know we got some scattered showers, some thunderstorms. I've been saying all week long to Eric Sneidel that this is every week, every year, we have 1 week of football frenzy where we get thunderstorms, we get lightning, we get delays. It's chaos, it's hectic, it's crazy. I've been saying for the last 7 days that tomorrow is going to be that day. So I'm fingers crossed that I'm wrong on this, but it's not looking super great for football frenzy tomorrow. However, we'll do our best. But either way, you know what? We got like 8 straight days of great weather in Rochester, New York in October. So we'll take it.
I'll take it all the time. I'm not the biggest golfer, but I know you've been on the links. I know you've been trying to get your golf game in just one last time, before the winter or whatever. But yeah, I saw that forecast too with the rain. I'm like, come on, man. Hopefully it's not that downpour like we had the sectional finals last fall.
Yeah, I was out there today. We shot 80, decent day, 3 birdies on the front. So we're getting in our rounds in, but it is time to get to our long-awaited. I don't know if people have really been awaiting it, but we're just going to say that they're long-awaiting the local high school football rankings. We started doing this last year. Hopefully you enjoyed it. We didn't really hear too much discussion about the rankings. It was really more like other sports who got motivated off of our predictions, our rankings, this, that, and whatnot. We didn't hear much about the football rankings, maybe because we were just so good at ranking these teams. So we'll just say that. But
you're right, way, because I do remember that last year. My man, was that some Schrader? Did Schrader go?
Schrader hockey, yeah.
Yeah, man, I love that energy though. He said it right to me. I was like, ooh, I wish I would have had the chance to say that to a reporter back in the day. But no, I love it. I love all the smoke.
Yeah, I heard that from Victor girls lacrosse grandparents and parents at the state championship. So either way, if you want to chime in the rankings, feel free. But here we go. We're 5 weeks into the high school football season. We've got our first rankings. We're going to update them every week until we get to the point where it really doesn't matter when we have, just a couple teams left. You can find these rankings in full, written out on our web story at rochesterfirst.com. But if you're just listening on Spotify or YouTube, here we go. Get your ears ready because here we go with our rankings. Number one, it's funny. I don't think at this point we had this many undefeated teams left. We've got 5 undefeated teams left in our large school rankings. The large school rankings will be our Class AA and Class A teams, small school, Class B and down. We've got a lot of undefeated teams left in our large school. We're going to start at the top with our 1 and 2. McQuaid at number 1 with a 5-0 record. UPrep at number 2 with a 5-0 record. You could really interchange these two teams. They don't play this year in the regular season. They're both going to start finally getting some really good tests coming up. They both play Hilton, McQuaid this week, UPrep later on in the regular season. By body of work alone, you might want to put UPrep at number 1. But when you win 4 sectional titles and you really haven't shown that you've fallen off yet, you still got to stick McQuaid at number 1.
Yeah, and it's not like, McQuaid is kind of like dragged their way to this number 1 ranking. Outside of, I believe, a Fairport game where it was pretty tight down to the wire, they've kind of handled their business and haven't really played with their food. Having said that, UPrep has been a really darn good team in their own right, who did take care of Fairport last week, which I saw in person. But like you said, undefeated, both teams have kind of took care of business. Got to go with the track record in that scenario.
Yeah, both teams kind of similar profiles. I know we talked about it a little bit with McQuaid and Hilton last week. UPrep, they both rely on a good running game. UPrep with CJ Robinson, McQuaid with John Harding. I think maybe UPrep at this point has a larger range of outcomes for their season where, UPrep can maybe reach a higher level, but McQuaid just has the experience and maybe a higher floor. So right now, I think we've got McQuaid at 1, UPrep at 2. I feel pretty strongly about that. At number 3, the Hilton Cadets at 5-0 on the season, our third undefeated Double-A team. Carl, you were at their game this past weekend where Hilton drove down to the wire, rode Robert Lowry till the wheels fell off, and won a great game against Schrader.
I mean, there's no other way than like to stamp your identity. We always say like, oh, styles make fights, and Hilton's one of those teams who just like to hit you in the mouth and run the ball. 6 minutes left in the game. They need a touchdown to win. Hilton ran the ball 13 times, gave it to Robert Lowry, 11 of them. And I believe they were all either up the middle or to the right. They didn't mess around. Everyone in the stadium knew what was going on. Schrader knew what was going on. Myself with the camera knew what was going on. And the Warriors still couldn't stop them. That's a stamp of a really good team who I believe milked the clock all the way down to like 12 seconds or something like that. So when you got an impressive win like that over a Schrader team who can really put up some points, you get my flowers, and you're definitely deserving of the number 3 spot.
Yeah, and as we mentioned before, Hilton is going to get a chance to either move up in the ranking or prove that number 3 spot is no joke. They get McQuaid this week. They get Aquinas next week, who is starting to turn their season around a little bit. And then they've got UPrep in a home finale. They got both those games at home. So as we're going to discuss a little bit later on in the show, we really have a top 3 here in Class AA. As we always talk about with these sectionals and these brackets, that number 1 seed is going to be very important. So Hilton certainly has a chance to prove themselves and get that number 1 spot. We'll see what happens in the coming weeks ahead. Moving down to our Class A undefeated teams, we've got 2 of them. We're going away from what the state rankings do, and I think we both feel pretty strongly about this. East is at number 4 in our local large school rankings at 5-0. They've played 4 teams who really, quite frankly, aren't in their weight class so far this season, and they've just, they've broken down the barn doors in those games. They weren't close at all. And then, of course, 2 weeks ago, their comeback victory against Canandaigua. We talked about it last week. They were up big. They let this lead slip away, and then a really composed drive by Zymir Jackson, that offense to win the game there. So we've got East at our number 4 spot.
I think Anthony Diaz just returned another punt back for a touchdown while we recorded this. But no, yeah, the East, once again, another year, another explosive squad with a bunch of playmakers on the outside. You alluded to a few of them, Anthony Diaz as well. I've seen them a few times and haven't been there to their games long because they take care of business.
They're our favorite highlight team by far.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter where you get there in their game. It could be an Irvin Wiggins pick 6. It can be a punt and return touchdown. It could be a deep play. They can just score from anywhere on the field, even if they don't have the ball.
Yeah, exactly. So like from that perspective, I love covering the Eagles. But yeah, they're definitely worthy of our number 4 spot and being the top team in Class A just based off their resume so far. And even though they, I don't want to say play with their food, let Canandaigua come back, but I mean, shoot, you get my respect for coming back after, I believe, 2 minutes is all they had to come down on that drive.
Yeah, it was just about a 2-minute drive.
Yeah, so you get my respect for being composed in that scenario on the road against the Canandaigua team who's been there before.
Moving on to our number 5 spot, our final undefeated large school team, the Victor Blue Devils. A gutsy victory against Irondequoit last week in overtime. They get the stop on the 2-point conversion. That game went into overtime. Victor scored first. Irondequoit had the chance for the 2. They went for it. You're on the road. You're, the quote-unquote underdog in that game. You take that chance 10 times out of 10. Play just didn't work out for them. So Victor is at number 5, 5-0 ranking. The last couple of weeks, they have, they've played some tight games. They played some good teams, but they've played some tight games. They only beat Schrader by a point. They only beat Victor 21-4, or they only beat Brighton 21-14, who isn't off to the greatest start to this season. They've had some decent games, but Brighton isn't in that upper echelon of teams this year. And then they beat Irondequoit by just 1 point. So they've got the freshman in so far right now, Eric Torres, the freshman lefty. I did see their other quarterback on the sidelines. It looked like it didn't seem like an injury type of thing. So maybe they're just going with their freshmen, seeing what their next 4 years can build for the Blue Devils. But Victor is 5-0 so far this season. They're number 5 in our rankings.
Yeah, you can look at their last 3 games one of two ways. One, all right, maybe they're not in that upper echelon of Section 5 teams, or you can also say they know how to win. I mean, there's
Mhm.
point blank period. So we'll find out later on in the year which one of those scenarios prove to be true. But 5-0, 5-0, you play who's in front of you. And at the end of the day, it's all about getting a dub. And that's what the Blue Devils have done through 5 games this season.
Yeah, and their final 3 weeks of the regular season, Churchville Chi this week, Gates Chi next week, and then at Spencerport to close out the regular season. Other than Spencerport, Churchville Chi, they've had a nice run so far. They're 4-1. We'll talk about them a little bit later. Maybe they give him a fight, but I think Victor is going to have a chance to, boost some confidence going into these playoffs and try and maybe lock up a number 1 or a number 2 seed, depending on how the sectional brackets go. Over to our number 6 spot. Decision here to be made between Schrader and Irondequoit. We're giving our number 6 spot to Webster Schrader. They were in the sectional championship game last year. They've shown that they've still got the explosive offense. They've played 2 really good teams. They've lost by the closest of margins. We already mentioned the 1-point loss to Victor, the 3-point loss to Hilton at the last second. So, they haven't been winning these tight games, but they're in them, and they're beating down on the teams that they're supposed to. So right now Schrader gets our number 6 spot with a 3-2 record.
Yeah, I've talked to you about this off camera a bit. I'm not the biggest guy on quality losses in the grand scheme of things. However, when you lose to Hilton the way they did last week, Hilton's no joke. And AA squad, although last year they did face in the sectional title game. But regardless, for this season, AA versus A. And when you're that close down to the wire, I mean, that's a team who's right there. And based off of that resume compared to maybe who Irondequoit has faced so far this year, I presume if those 2 teams were to meet on a neutral field, I will lean Schrader just based off of their high-powered offense and how explosive they've shown to be at times this season.
And they will meet in 2 weeks' time. As we move to our number 7 team, Irondequoit at 4-1, they will meet in 2 weeks. That'll be at Schrader. That should be a really fun game. That'll be a Friday night game. That might be our game of the week in number 7. So Irondequoit's at 4-1 on the season. We talked about them last week. Their 4 wins, they haven't been very close. However, those 4 teams have, I believe this is still holding true, they have a combined 1 win on the season. So their wins have not been against quality teams. But I do have to say, I don't want to, diss the Eagles. They really did impress me in that Victor game. They were down 14-0 at the half, and they were really the better team in that second half. I mean, if Irondequoit was going to win that game, I was trying to, rack my brain around how high we were going to put Irondequoit at these rankings, because Irondequoit really shut down Victor. Victor got a little one-dimensional. They couldn't really pass the ball. They could really only try and run, and Irondequoit just shut them down. They matched Victor's physicality, which is a really tough thing to do, as we've seen over the years. Irondequoit really impressed me a lot. They go for the win. The 2-point conversion was a little short. They had a 4th down conversion. It was like 4th and 9. They had a really pretty pass to the sidelines, toe tapped it in. So other than the fact that they didn't win that game, I think Irondequoit did about as much as you could do to prove that they belong in this top 7, which is really kind of a tier above the rest so far this year.
And they're going to have opportunities from here on out to kind of prove their worth. Obviously you just alluded to they'll face Schrader, but Thomas isn't Schrader, but Thomas will be a better win than what they've had so far on their schedule.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then also Brighton, the final regular season of the game of the season, will also be another chance to kind of prove where they are. So they're going to have opportunities to show that those first 4 wins of the season weren't fluky at all.
Moving into our next team at number 8, as I kind of alluded to, we kind of have a really strong 7 that we're feeling good about so far this year so far. If you go 8 down, you've got some teams with some nice results, but not a ton of consistency. We've got Canandaigua in our number 8 spot with a 3-2 record so far this year. As we mentioned before, they had a really tight game with East, a game that, proves a lot to us at the fact that, okay, yeah, we've said this a lot this year, that Canandaigua might be a little down this year, but you put them in a big game, they're going to be right in there. but Canandaigua, they only beat Arcadia by 1 point, 7-6. They didn't look that good against UPrep, lost 27-7. Granted, that is a really good UPrep team, obviously. And then Spencerport, that game, they won 27-3, but it was kind of close in the second half. So Canandaigua number 8, 3-2, but I don't think any of us would be surprised if it comes around playoff time and Canandaigua really shows out.
Oh yeah, and based on the last 3 games of the regular season, they should be able to ramp up at the end of the year, get in the groove of things, and maybe get out some kinks that they had earlier in the year. I know they're young in some particular spots on offense, so if they can get some of those guys caught up to speed a little bit, they'll be fine. And Canandaigua come playoff time, I think we know how that story goes most years. So, like you just mentioned, come back and let's see where Canandaigua's looking at November 5th. Let's see how that goes.
Moving into our number 9 spot, Aquinas, a team that 2 or 3 weeks ago we kind of left for dead, and now they're at 3-2 and maybe the 4th best team in Class AA. There really is a void with the number 4 team in Class AA, but Aquinas might be able to fill it. They're at 3-2 so far this season. They had a really impressive 35-14 victory against Fairport, where when we sent out our news photographer Damon to that game, I was thinking Fairport 14-point win, and Aquinas kind of proved my point of thinking wrong by winning 35-14. They took care of business against Rush Henrietta. Now, granted, other than that, there's not a whole lot to speak about. They got shut out by Pittsford, a team that's playing some good defense this year, but is also offensively, they haven't put up a lot of points this year so far. And then they lost 33-7 to UPrep, where I was at that game for about a combined 2 quarters. It really didn't look super close, but still 33-7 isn't, the most lopsided result in the world. So Aquinas, number 9 so far this year.
Yeah, I mean, based off the last 2 weeks, you're like, all right, this makes sense. But then you look at the Pittsburgh shutout loss, and you're like, all right, what's going on here? So once we get, I know we talked about how the top 7 is like a clear cut. If we're being honest here, I think Canandaigua may not be in that top 7 like bracket, but even there's a gap between Canandaigua and 9 and the rest.
Yeah.
So all of these resumes are flawed to a certain extent. They're not perfect or as strong as the ones above them. But Aquinas the past 2 weeks showing that they're on an upward trajectory for sure.
And then at number 10, we've got Fairport at 1-4 on the season. We really don't like to reward quality losses, but Fairport has probably just proven that they're the next best team in AA. And of the teams remaining that we haven't mentioned so far in Class A, I think if you put these 2 teams on a field, I think Fairport would be the presumed winner. Fairport, they had a nice win over Penfield that I was there too. They looked pretty good in that game. They lost in overtime to Hilton, undefeated Hilton. They played our number 3 ranked team to the wire. They lost in overtime. They almost drove down to beat or tie McQuaid. They lost 35-28. And, the Aquinas result, as we mentioned, was surprising. They didn't look super strong against UPrep. But you almost beat Hilton. You almost beat McQuaid. I know we don't like to reward the almost, but I think in this spot we have to.
Yeah, I mean, we're like we said, the resumes are getting kind of a little wonky down here. And I will say, though, for the teams who may not, who aren't number 10, you look at Churchville Child with the record that they have, Brighton sitting there at 3-2 as well. They have opportunities this week kind of to show that they're worth. Churchville Child is going up against Victor. That's a great opportunity to show that, like, all right, like we deserve to put Section 5 on notice. And then also Brighton is going up against Schrader, which I think that game has a chance to have some fireworks. So Brighton also has a prime chance to solidify themselves in number 10. But yeah, these rankings, once you get past Ronacoy, it's like, like let's see who really deserve to be here.
No, I mean, Fairport's got Sam Pucci, but Ricardo Lagares for Churchville Child. If you haven't seen this guy play, he can do some fun things from the running back position. So that's where we have our top 10 in our large school rankings. Moving on to our small school rankings, number 1, Monroe. Would we like to say more than a sentence about Monroe and how they're number 1 this year?
They're really good at football, and this team is going to be playing deep into November.
Yeah, Yeah, if you were to have to pick one team to, pick for a deep run to represent Section 5 far, it's probably Monroe. Granted, we'll see how they rack up against some other teams in Class B. Section 5 hasn't fared particularly well in Class B the last couple of years, if I remember my history correctly, but Monroe going to try and change that. At our number 2 spot, Leroy. We hyped up that Leroy Attica Alexander last week, and it kind of lived up to the hype. Leroy is just, we talk about styles make fights. They're just going to run the ball at you, and it's tough for someone to get in their way because Tony Piazza just keeps doing great things, and they just keep beating really good teams.
It's funny, you show the highlights of some of these things like ground and pound or whatever, right? And 3-yard touchdown run, 7-yard touchdown run, blase, 3 yards on the cloud of dust, cool, whatever. But then the one highlight popped up, him like busting like a 50-yard run. I'm like, all right, he got some wheels on him too, Mr. Piazza. Yeah, Leroy, I mean, that's one of those teams where you got to make sure your helmet's strapped up right, the pads are nice and tight, because they come to be physical all 4 quarters. That's just based off the highlights that I've seen. And when you take down a team like Attica Alexander, who prides themselves on that side of the ball as well, and you take it to them like that, yeah, you definitely something like that. So Class C school doing their thing like that definitely deserves their flowers at number 2.
Yeah, Attica Alexander is at number 3 with 4-1. That was a close game into halftime, but Leroy eventually pulled away. I haven't seen Attica Alexander in action yet so far this year, but I did see a little bit of Leroy. And yeah, just ground and pound. They know what they're going to do. They know what the other team knows what they're going to do, and they can't stop them. So Leroy's looking like a pretty darn strong Class C team so far this year. They have really, gone through the gauntlet so far in Class C so far this year. They beat Letchworth Warsaw Perry, they beat East Rochester Gananda, and they just beat Attica Alexander already. So it's kind of, Penny and Dundee is a little feisty, but I'm not really expecting much of a fight from the rest of the teams Leroy has on their schedule. Moving into our 4 and 5, we bump up back to our Class B schools. HFL is at number 4. Batavia is at number 5. Both of these teams have gotten a chance to play Monroe, and it wasn't very pretty in either of those games, but both of these 2 schools once again proving that they're, other than Monroe, they're the class of Class B. And HFL, you were at that game. They got a nice win over Batavia. HFL at number 4, Batavia at number 5.
Yeah, Matt Meacham, pretty darn good quarterback down there at HFL, led them to a nice win over Batavia whenever they met. I believe that was week 3. Yeah, week 3. Rest of the year here on out, they should handle business. Like you alluded to, though, last year it was just those 3 teams, and you figure Batavia was on top, but all right, we'll see in the playoffs. You kind of know at this point who's on top, but now it's about, all right, who's gonna be peaking between those 2 and 3 teams. Right now, head to head, you got to put the Cougars over Batavia.
Yeah, and both of these, the regular season games weren't pretty against Monroe, but Batavia beat them last year in the playoffs. HFL has certainly a strong pedigree, so you never know what's going to happen when the month turns to, it is in October right now, but October and November. At our number 6 spot, East Rochester Gananda, back down to Class C. ERG, they've shown me a lot in the games that I've seen. They just haven't been able to win these close games against these more ground and pound physical teams. East ERG has a lot of talent, both at the quarterback position, outside. I think they've suffered a couple injuries so far. Every time at their game, they got a couple guys hurt, things of that nature. So I think they're losing a little bit, maybe of their interior presence due to injury. I could be wrong on that, but ERG's had a nice season so far. They're at number 6 in our rankings.
Yeah, like those 2 losses to, if I'm not mistaken, they were to Leroy and Attica Alexander. That kind of hurts.
Yeah.
But I mean, nothing to hang your hat on. And neither of those games, I wasn't at either of those games, but based off what we've been told and what we've saw, it's not like they don't belong on the same field as either of those teams. So Class C playoffs is going to be a war, and I can't wait to see how that shakes out. But we still got 3 weeks of regular season ball, so we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Yeah, Attica Alexander was a last-minute touchdown. Leroy, a 2-score game, so don't count out the Bombers just yet. Moving on to our number 8 team in the rankings, Letchworth Warsaw Perry. Letchworth Perry Warsaw. It seems like they decide to which order it is depending on where you look. but they've looked good so far this season at 3-2. They've suffered some close losses to some of our top teams in this rankings. They lost 16-12 to Attica Alexander in the season opener. And then they only lost 12-7 to Leroy in week 2. So they opened the year with 2 tough losses, but they really bounced back with some wins over some teams that they should be favored. They beat a 4-1 Hornell team 28-22 last week. Neither of us have seen Letchworth Warsaw Perry this year, but they're a ground and pound team, and they're winning. They're in these tight games, and you get to playoff time, you never know what's going to happen there.
I think holding Attica Alexander and Leroy to 16 and 12 points respectively, though, is definitely shows that they're not too far from those teams, and I think even though they're down here at number 7, a couple fumbles go the wrong way, a couple short fields. Who knows how these games shake out in the playoffs?
And then moving down to number 8, Pembroke at 5-0 on the season, down in 8-man. Now, usually in the past, we've kind of reserved that number 10 spot for our best 8-man team because it's really tough to tell, 8-man, things like that, yada, yada. But Pembroke has certainly proven that if they had a couple more, kids showing up to school these days, they would be one of, if not the best teams, probably the best team in Class D, because Mr. Tyson Totten is just putting on a show for the Dragons. They've won 55-28. They have won 58-22, 42-14, 49-16, 69-28. It's really just them kind of deciding when they want to stop scoring points. And Tyson Totten, he might as well just have every touchdown so far this year for that team. Every week we see them, it's just ridiculous numbers. And Pembroke has just really proven themselves to be a step above in 8-man this year. They're the number 1 team in the state in 8-man football this year, and they're legit, Carl.
I saw them the opening game against Red Jacket, and obviously I've covered Rochester Section 5 stuff for the past 2 years, so I'm like, oh yeah, I know Tyson Totten, but it kind of crossed my mind how good he was. He reminded me real quick, him and the rest of the Dragons over there. That's a real good ball player. Big kid too. He not I think he's 185 or something like that. He's not a little dude out there. So regardless of whatever classification he's in, he's balling. He's gonna be a good player. Because he's 6'2", 185. Put it in context, I played my state championship senior year at 163. So I was a little dude. So that's a big dude out there toting the rock, and he a problem out there. So Mr. Tyson Totten, hopefully I can catch you one more time before this season ends, because you special.
Yeah, we'll definitely get him in sectional playoff time. And the only other team that is ranked in the state in 8-man ball so far this year in Section 5, that would be Calmum Byron Burgeon, who suffered a loss to the Dragons by a tune of 58-22. So a step above. We're very confident that 8 is definitely not too high for them. And then at number 9 and number 10 so far this season, we've got our Class D schools, York Pavilion at number 9. We've got Canisteo Greenwood at number 10. This class has really kind of lost its lead dog with the injury to Bodie Hyde in Oakfield, Alabama, Alba. They've really started to struggle since he's left the table so far this year. York Pavilion, Canisteo Greenwood, they both played recently so far this season. They're both at 4-1. York Pavilion beat Canisteo Greenwood 13-12. They also beat Avon 28-19, which is another nice resume boosting win in Avon. So York Pavilion and Canisteo Greenwood 9-10. Once again, none of these teams are really getting a ton of respect in the state rankings. In fact, York Pavilion is ranked at number 11, but Canisteo Greenwood, and on the outside looking in, Avon as well, Oakfield, Alabama as well. So York Pavilion at number 9, Canisteo Greenwood at number 10.
Yeah, I have not seen either of these teams in person. These are usually teams we catch during sectional playoff times whenever they face some teams closer to our area. But I believe Canisteo Green used to be an 8-man, right? And they used to
they were down on 8-man for a couple of years.
Yeah, they definitely had some ball players down there. So I know there's not a lot of teams in these small school rankings, but they definitely deserve to be top 10 as well as for York Pavilion.
Yeah, Canisteo Greenwood's going to get to host Avon this week at home. So that'll be a good way for Canisteo Greenwood to prove that they deserve that spot in their rankings, or maybe Avon jumps a spot. And I do have to give some props to Canisteo Greenwood for changing their name to an actual team name so far this year. You've got Avon is still figuring things out. Canisteo Greenwood still figuring things out. Canisteo Greenwood, the Chargers. So we have a logo for them. We have a team name for them. So Canisteo Greenwood, they deserve some flowers alone for simply deciding on a name so far.
Yeah, I didn't even realize that until last week. I'm putting a show together and I'm typing in Canisteo Greenwood's name. I'm like, the Chargers? Now, granted, we haven't called their highlights, so I wouldn't have known that. But good for them for, figuring out something quick and sticking with it, because someone like me who indecisive, it would have taken me like 13 years to figure out a nickname or something like that.
No, and I don't think we have any other Chargers in the area. I could be mistaken. So it's original. I like their logo. It's like a swooshing. I think it's a horse on there. So I like it. I like it. Good job, Canisteo Green. So those are our rankings so far this year. We will update them every week so far for the rest of the regular season and beyond. Not to as much depth as we did in week 1, but certainly we will keep you up to date on those. We tackled a lot of these football teams, so we're simply going to go to our games to watch so far this week, putting an eye on some of the non-football teams playing some really good games coming up. Carl, your game to watch.
Yeah, I don't need to put makeup on this one. Aquinas versus McQuaid, boys soccer. What else do you want? These two teams are really darn good again this year. McQuaid 6-3-1. Aquinas haven't lost this year. They're 12-0-1. I believe in Class A. They'll meet next Wednesday, October 11th. They met earlier this year, September 9th to be exact, to a 1-1 tie. So one more time, these two rival schools get to link up before sectional play, get some hatred off your heart, little rivalry matchup, Finally, someone got to be better than the other. They don't want to tie twice. I mean, come on, no one want to do that. So that's above all else, that's the reason why this game should be someone they should lock in for. Somebody got to be the best private school in the area. So we're going to find out the 11th next week when McQuaid and Aquinas link up on Wednesday.
Yeah, McQuaid, they did suffer a loss to Spencerport a couple days ago. So they dropped a game there. But other than that, they haven't lost to a Section 5 team so far this season. And Aquinas just had a really nice win against Livonia, who is the number 2 team in the state in Class B. That was Livonia's first loss on the season. So a really nice overtime victory for the Little Irish. That should be a good one next week. I've got another great game on the same day. We kind of talked about these teams before, this matchup before. It is Spencerport versus Schrader in girls soccer. These two teams did meet so far earlier in the regular season. It was a 4-0 Spencerport victory, but Schrader has proven so far this season, if they're not facing Spencerport, they're going to be pretty darn good so far this year. They already beat Thomas 3-1. They beat Penfield 2-1. They've got another good test against Hilton on Monday. It's looking like it's going to be tough to see a team to beat Spencerport so far this season. They're really rolling. However, they did, play some close games early in the season. Spencerport's going to get another chance to prove that they're the class of Class AA, and then Schrader's going to get a chance to prove that they can hang around with the big boys. They don't have to win this game, but I think at the very least, you've got to have a confidence-building result, because you're probably going to see them in the sectional playoff time. It's a lot different if you get blown out in the first game, you play them tight in game number 2, than your confidence going into that championship game if you lost to them handedly both games in the regular season.
Yeah, you don't want to get defeated before you get on the field, So, think of your most dominant athletes ever, Jordan, Tiger, or whatever. Sometimes you just lose before you even get out there because you know how darn good they are. And I'm not saying Spencerport is Tiger Woods by any means or anything like that.
They might be.
I mean, shoot, how many championships they got in a row. But in that regard, you lose to a team in dominant fashion both times. You listening to what the coach say got a pregame, but you like, yeah, but do you really think we got a chance? So this is a ultimate opportunity for Schrader to just prove it to themselves, not necessarily anyone else, but just those ladies in that locker room that shows that they prove to themselves that they belong on the field with Spencerport.
Yeah, that should be a good day of Wednesday soccer here around Section 5. Tough for us to get out there with the Bills going on, but maybe we can get some cameras on some goals so far this Wednesday. Either way, we will definitely have our cameras out there this weekend with our high school football action. We do have some games today on Thursday. We are still doing our football frenzy on Friday. weather pending, knock on wood, fingers crossed. Some good games coming up this weekend. Hilton hosting McQuaid, as we talked about before. Gananda playing at home, just their second ever game at Gananda they're playing. So good for the Gananda community to get that for their homecoming week. That should be a good game as well. But that'll do it for us on the High School Huddle podcast. Once again, you can find us on rochesterfirst.com, which is where you can see these high school football rankings laid out in convenient grid form. You can catch us on YouTube, you can catch us on Apple Podcasts, and you can catch us on Spotify. That'll do it for us this week. We'll see you once again next week on the High School Huddle. For Carl Jones, I'm AJ Feldman. It's time to break the huddle, and we will see you next time.